If you enjoy this kind of story, please consider subscribing to my channel. I make many videos on this topic. Thank you. Truly. Have you ever wondered why the wisest people often say the least? Why, in a room full of noise, it's the one who stays silent that holds the most power? We live in a world where everyone wants to speak, to shout, to win every argument. But what if the real power is knowing when not to speak at all? There's a moment, a heartbeat, where silence becomes louder than words. One sentence can save a life, but another can destroy a soul. So I ask you, what would you choose? To speak or to stay silent? This is the story of Elias, a man who spoke less, but lived more, a man who said nothing, but changed everything. Stay with me. You're about to hear something that might change the way you see wisdom forever. His name was Elias Hart, a quiet blacksmith in a small, fog-covered village at the edge of the mountains. People often forgot he existed. He rarely spoke, never argued, never raised his voice. Some said he was mute. Others said he was a fool. But no one really knew him. Elias lived alone, worked with fire and steel, shaped horseshoes and tools with his bare hands. Yet his silence was louder than the sound of hammers striking iron. One morning, everything changed. Mira, the village beauty, cried out that her golden pendant had been stolen. She was frantic, shaken, tears in her eyes, and like a wildfire, the rumor spread. They say it was Elias. He's poor. He must have taken it. No one else goes near her home. No proof, no trial, only suspicion and silence. A mob gathered. They stormed his workshop. They kicked down his tools, burned the edge of his shed. Mira stood there, watching, conflicted, but said nothing. Elias didn't defend himself, didn't raise a hand, didn't scream or plead. He simply bowed his head and began to collect the scattered tools on the ground, one by one. Children who used to throw stones at his door laughed when he picked them up and stacked them quietly like sacred relics. The villagers spat words like knives. "You thief! You shameful man! You don't speak because you're guilty." But Elias was silent. He looked at them, not with hate, but with sorrow. Then softly said, just one sentence, "The fire teaches, by burning." And he returned inside. That night, a storm hit. Lightning struck the village square. Everyone was forced indoors. But in that storm, a secret came to light. Myra's cousin, a young man named Caleb, was caught trying to flee the village with a small bag of coins and jewelry. The missing pendant was inside. He had stolen it all. The next morning, the truth spread like fire again. But this time, with shame. Mira was pale. She walked, barefoot, to Elias's home. The villagers followed, silent. They found him, repairing the broken bench outside, as if nothing had happened. Mira knelt down and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I should have spoken." Elias looked at her gently and said, "When the iron is hot, you do not scream at it. You shape it, slowly, patiently, with silence." From that day forward, Mira came to his shop every evening. Not to buy, not to talk, but to watch, to learn how to be still. Over time, the village changed. People began to greet Elias with respect. Some brought food, some left small coins near his door. But Elias never spoke of what had happened, never mentioned the insult, never reminded them of their cruelty. Because he knew, some things are better healed in silence. Years later, when Elias passed away, the village carved his words on a stone by the well. It read, "Wisdom is not always what you say. Sometimes, it's what you choose not to." Would you have stayed silent like Elias? Or would you have shouted back to defend your name? What would you have done? In the Dhammapada, the words of the Buddha echo with timeless truth. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows him, as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the cart. Dhammapada, verse 1. But then the Buddha says, if one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves. Dhammapada, verse 2. So, what is a pure mind? A mind that does not rush to judge. A heart that does not race to speak. A person who, like Elias, knows that truth does not need to shout. In another sutra, a monk once asked the Buddha, "Master, what should we do when others speak ill of us?" The Buddha smiled gently and said, "If someone offers you a gift, and you refuse to receive it, to whom does the gift belong?" The monk replied, "To the one who offered it." And the Buddha said, in the same way, when someone offers anger, insults, and you do not accept them, those things still belong to the one who gave them. That is silent strength. That is spiritual maturity. You see, silence is not weakness, not fear, not surrender. Silence can be compassion. Silence can be restraint. Silence can be wisdom. The Buddha once remained silent when accused by a jealous monk. The man shouted before the Sangha, called him a liar, a fraud, but the Buddha said nothing. Later, Ananda asked, "Master, why didn't you respond?" And the Buddha answered, "An angry person is like a house on fire. Would you pour oil on the flames, or wait for the wind to pass?" Elias, the silent blacksmith, embodied this exact teaching. He didn't pour oil. He waited for the wind to pass. And when the flames died down, the truth was all that remained. Now let me ask you, how often do we speak just to defend our pride? How many times have we hurt someone, not with fists, but with words? How many moments of peace have we destroyed because we couldn't hold our tongue? The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Dhammapada, verse 100. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is say nothing. Sometimes, the most powerful answer is silence. But silence must come from compassion, not from pride. Elias wasn't silent to prove himself right. He was silent to keep himself pure. He let karma do the speaking. He let time reveal the truth. That is true wisdom. Pause. So I ask you, are your words building bridges or burning them? Are your silences holding anger or holding space for peace? When someone offends you, do you answer with your ego or your heart? The answer will reveal who you really are. Let us choose words like medicine, not like weapons. Let us value silence as much as sound. Let us be like Elias. So now, after hearing the story of Elias, after reflecting on the Buddha's words, I ask you, what kind of silence do you carry? Is it the silence of fear, or the silence of wisdom? The silence of pain, or the silence of peace? Because silence is not always golden. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it's brave. Sometimes it's the only thing keeping your soul intact. Elias was humiliated, falsely accused, mocked, abandoned, yet he spoke only one sentence. And with that silence, he saved his dignity. He taught a village. He transformed a life. Mira was changed. The villagers were changed. And maybe you are, too. Maybe today, you're facing your own storm, your own false judgment, your own pain. And maybe you're tempted to scream, to fight, to prove them wrong. But stop, just for a moment. Breathe. Because maybe the strongest version of you is the one who chooses stillness over shouting. So here's a challenge. Today, don't rush to reply. Don't comment out of anger. Don't speak from ego. Don't argue to win. Instead, pause. Breathe. Let your heart speak first. If someone offends you, ask, is this worth my peace? If someone lies about you, ask, will the truth reveal itself in time? If someone tries to bring you down, ask, do I need to go down with them? Because sometimes, the person yelling is already losing, and the person quiet is already rising. Like Elias, like the Buddha, like you, can be. Pause. Now, I want to ask you, and I hope you answer honestly. Right finger, have you ever said something that you later wished you hadn't? Right finger, have you ever not said something and realized later that silence was your greatest wisdom? Right finger, is there someone in your life you wish you had forgiven instead of fighting? Tell me in the comments below. Be honest. Your story might help someone else learn to hold their peace. And here's one more question, one that might spark debate. Right finger, if you were in Elias's place, falsely accused, publicly shamed, would you stay silent or fight back? What do you think is the wiser choice? There's no perfect answer, but your voice matters. Your silence matters too. So if this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's hurting, someone who's judged, someone who's trying to be better. Let them know they don't have to scream to be heard. They don't have to speak to have strength. They can walk like Elias, quietly, firmly, peacefully, and still leave footprints deep in the heart of the world. Folded hands, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story brought value to your heart, subscribe to this channel, like the video, share it, be the reason someone else chooses peace. And remember, true wisdom is not how much you say, it's knowing when to say nothing at all.